Hey everybody, welcome back to Gigs. This month we are going to be talking about freelancing with an amazing panel. This is an interesting one for me because I recently have become a freelancer. And the other magic special thing to know here is this is a freelancer panel, which means none of us are wearing pants. So we're going to start this off by having everybody introduce themselves. Let's have Jess go first.
Okay, I'm Jessica Damerst, and I don't know how long this is supposed to be, so I'm just gonna say words and then Grant will tell me to shut up. I started working in games a long time ago. Had my major was in digital media, and I used to work in games journalism, and then from games journalism, I segued into working for a publisher. Like I worked at EA, and then from there to a developer. And then when I left the developer, my 9-to-5 job, I decided that I wanted to work from anywhere in the world. So I took the skill set that I had from university, from working with publishers and developers, and became a remote freelance worker.
Cool. Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Fong. I'm an illustrator and a concept artist, and also co-founder and creative lead at our newly formed indie game studio, Lonely Egg Studio. And I primarily do freelancing for indie projects and private individuals. And I started most of my career from selling at various conventions in California. And I work remote, so.
So no pants.
No pants.
All right. Zippmann.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Zippmann, and well, I don't know. I'm a designer and a game developer, and I've loved games my whole life, probably like everyone. Started out doing that, went to Full Sail, worked for some bigger game companies, and I'm from the Midwest, so I decided, hey, I want to be near family, work near home, so I sort of used the skills I had learned from bigger game companies and some of the connections I had made, and tried to get some game development contracts, as well as going into web development, business-to-business game stuff, and just anything I could do, because in the Midwest, it's a sparse landscape. Yeah, and so I did that for a few years, and now I'm actually kind of getting more back into, like a full-time thing. But, this has been my freelance tenure, so.
Awesome. Paige?
I'm Paige Ashlynn. I started in games in 2012, and I started doing freelance in 2013. At first, for me, it was very just picking up small things I could do on the side, because I was running my own little startup indie company. But in 2015, I went freelance full-time, full-time indie game programming, and I'm still doing it now. So I'm kind of like a bit in the middle. I've learned a bunch of stuff. There's still a lot of stuff I have yet to learn.
Awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into some questions. So the first question is actually for me, a new freelancer. What programs do you use outside of the traditional game tools to do your job? So tracking finance, tracking hours, things like that. What kind of tools do you use?
Well, I have used a lot, because sometimes what tools you use depend on what your client wants you to use. But one thing that I would definitely recommend, and that I always use on my own in parallel to whatever they ask me to use, is Toggle. For me, Toggle provides the right level of hour tracking and specificity for per client, per project, without a lot of overhead that more sophisticated time tracking software would have.
I like Toggle, and we also just got Wave for our studio. So Wave is free. It just keeps track of your expenses and your income, and you can take your digital photographs of all your receipts and everything, and it just stores all of that for you. So it's nice. Yeah.
I use a software called Hours, which was, I think, originally an app for the iPhone, but I use the web interface. It's $9 a month, but I actually got it for free for a year because they were working out bugs. And after a year, I was kind of addicted to it, so I just continued to pay for it. But it's very cool, and it's not too in-depth, but it provides, it's not any more in-depth than it needs to be, and it provides reports and you can separate things by clients and projects and stuff like that.
Grant, I had a question about the question. It was related to expenses only or to bugs and tasks?
No, just kind of any tools that you use outside of the traditional game development tools, right? So as opposed to just like an editor or, like Maya or Illustrator or something like that, what kind of tools do you find as a freelancer that you have to use to kind of keep track of your business?
Gotcha.
Skype. Screen sharing.
Yeah.
I've used Basecamp a lot because they wanted to, and Jira a lot. But when it's my choice, I use Asana and Slack. I use Asana to track tasks, Slack to talk, and they interoperate between each other. And then I've worked with other people that I've employed in freelance, so they can track their hours in Asana, like how many hours it took them to do a task. It's very loose for the way I do it. But hearing some of your guys' answers, it seems like maybe there's some more intricate ways you can track it, which seems actually really cool. So.
I'd actually also really recommend Asana. I've used a bunch of different task management software on different projects, and I feel like Asana is in a really nice sweet spot between something as complicated as Jira versus something that
or hands-off
maybe is a little clunky.
It's awesome, and it has rainbows and bats and all these cool little. It's really cool.
Check that out. I use
Also,
Trello, and I find that I like Trello for the drag and drop with cards and tasks, and clients can kind of see what tasks I'm working on. But to do hours tracking it, I just have to leave a comment, which is really annoying.
And Trello is also a little difficult if you have more than we had 15 people using our Trello, and it just got really messy just because the UI was kind of hard to have to switch between all these different columns. And I mean, it works for, I think, it works best, I think, for people, groups 5 or less.
I would even say 3 or less.
Yeah, maybe 3 or less.
Well, at Unknown Worlds, we use Trello for our team of 30 something, and it's actually surprisingly it works pretty well. I mean, it has its limits, right? And not everybody uses it, but we do. And the other thing we like about it is we can allow people to view the Trello boards and see what we're developing because we're open development at Unknown Worlds, so that's really cool.
I think this is a recurring theme of what everybody's saying is different tools are going to work for different teams and different people.
Yeah.
So it's good to test them all out. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of competing ones out there right now kind of vying for supremacy, right? And so who knows exactly which one's going to win out. And plus, you mentioned Jira, I do feel I've used that more when I work at a bigger company, and I do feel that and Handsoft are a lot harder to use.
Yeah.
But I mean, they can handle the load though, right? So.
Right. I mean, I actually
for
love
file
Jira.
Google Docs, or Google Drive. That's what I use.
Same.
Okay. Yeah, I use Adobe, but.
Oh, that's cool.
I don't know.
That's fancy.
Sometimes it's a little weird, the hierarchy of the directories. If I give someone access to a higher directory, doesn't mean that they get access to a lower directory. It's so I have to individually go in and kind of give access at each level. Sometimes I haven't worked it out, but I like it.
Do you guys use Git?
Git, yeah. Bitbucket.
Yeah,
private repositories for the win.
Yeah, 10 gigs, right? Yeah.
As we learned, Jess is the fancy freelancer who goes to an office, so she uses Adobe and all the fancy tools.
But she's still savvy enough to use the free Bitbucket though, so that's good.
Yeah, Bitbucket's free. I love free stuff.
Except it crashed a couple months back, right? I lost my whole repository and had to re-put it up.
No.
Is that wait, Bitbucket?
Am I thinking of Bitbucket? It had a crash where they lost a lot of repositories. Yeah, they lost ours. Yeah.
I think I saw that and was and then I opened my repositories and I was like, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
It sucks for those people.
Anybody who's just any freelancer, I think, should have backups of all of their stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Just do it, please.
Yep. I actually have cloud syncing, the Adobe cloud syncing on my computer. So I store all of my project files for my clients in the cloud sync folder. And then that way, if I need to use a bigger computer with more power, then I can just directly access them on that computer, something like that. Or give it to a client when I'm done.
Oh, and I wanted to mention we all said we use Git, but I've worked on projects like a VR project that had a ton of assets where we just couldn't use it, and so we used Perforce. And one solution we found that was really great was Assembla.com. It's $25 a month, and you get 10 gigs, and it's a Perforce repository. It's really great. So anyway,
That's
I use
awesome.
Plastic.
Plastic? Oh, I never heard of that.
So many tools.
Yeah, I've tried Perforce. I used that on actually my very first project, and I really like it, but I kind of feel the same way about Jira. It's like managing it becomes a task in itself. I really actually personally prefer Mercurial HG over Git, but everybody uses Git, so I use Git.
Well, luckily, you could use both and sort of still use like a GUI that uses both. You know, like
Yes.
I think some of the GUIs can sort of use, Mercury or Git. So.
All right, let's move on to another question. Zach Lyle asked, when dealing with individuals rather than companies, how do you handle the legal aspects of the transactions? Do you have a document already written up by a lawyer, ready to use at any time? I guess, so the real meat of the question is, how do you deal with doing freelance contract work for an individual as opposed to a company?
I could talk more on
Contacts.
the individual stuff. The company ones, though, somebody else might have more experience with those.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I thought somebody with more company experience.
Talk about the individual stuff. That's what the real question is about individuals.
Yeah, individuals, I just have like a list of questions that I send the person, and for the most part that fills in all the answers for my template contracts, and then I have like my own lawyer that kind of goes over it and gives me the thumbs up, and then we
She's
sign
the
everything.
fancy one.
Yeah.
She's the fancy one.
Yeah, so we sign off on everything, and then and then we just deal with how payment goes around, and it's all good. We all both parties feel safe.
Oh my goodness. If someone doesn't pay me, I just send them a statement at the end of the month being like, yo dog, you didn't pay me. I have
That's more
nothing.
I handle it too, but I've worked with some big companies that they set up all the contracts, and I just sort of, it's part developing relationships and trust, and getting to know that person I'm working with, and knowing that, I'm not a lawyer, I can't afford a lawyer, but they're not going to put stuff in there that's going to screw me, so I've had good experience with it. And then on the other end, when I work with people and I pay them, it's more of a personal thing where we don't necessarily have a contract, but I'll make like a work order that says the hours they have, and it's all like documented for taxes, but there's no contract between me and them or anything like that. We're just cohorts, and we're old friends. So I haven't had that experience of working with people I don't know in freelance really. So
it's
on the side of actually the people I'm working with to develop. On the side of obviously the client I haven't known, but
generally I know them, so it's like a contact that either it's a contact that someone else that I know knows, so that in some ways they're held responsible through the person that introduced us as being like a good human, and in other ways, it's like we'll have a Skype meeting, we'll have these conversations, and I can kind of suss them out as someone who I feel like actually is legitimate, and I also require payment for project basis. I require payments up front, so that clears out and a lot of problems, because if someone can pay for half the project up front, they're probably going to pay the other half. And if they don't, I haven't had to do it, but I imagine that I would do something, there's probably some steps I could take where I could draft up something that sounded very intimidating to be like, you didn't pay me and I delivered the work. And usually for example, when I'm doing web development, I spin up a VPS for them. So I have their server running, and if they don't pay me, pretty easy to turn it off, things like that. So I try to just be able to pull plugs where I can.
So for myself, I've only worked with small companies and individuals, and so far almost everyone that I've worked with, they've had their own contracts they wanted to use. But I personally won't work without a contract, and that's based on experiences I had before I got into games. But over time, I started out with a really fairly intense contract that I had a lawyer draw up for me, and just over the years I've simplified and cut more and more to where I tend to prefer bare bones contracts. And I think a lot of it is because of the what Jess and Nick were saying, that it's like most, like, the clients I work for, they don't have money to sue me, and I don't have money to sue them. So for me, the value in the contract is largely so that we have like a fixed document that says at the beginning, this is what we talked about doing. This is how much I was going to get paid. These were the dates that were important, and this is how we renegotiate.
Yeah, I think it also, like, the contracts, it just gives transparency and clarity. Like, yeah. I've definitely had experiences of, when we talked about it, they were like, I just want a commission of this, like, one character. And then when I finished, they're like, hey, you just gave me the final product. I wanted, like, all the sketches and all the, the work in progress stuff too. And I'm like, that wasn't, in the contract, and that stuff is all gone. So, that caused, like, a rift in between us because we didn't have it laid out. Yeah.
Right, like roommates that don't have the chores all written on the fridge, right?
Yeah, like, and I don't have like a formal draft for a contract, but I absolutely won't do work unless we've sent an email to each other where I've said, either this is the hourly rate and this is how many hours you're expecting me to work, or this is the project rate and here's the attached invoice. And they write back, okay, or they've paid it and I can say I've received your money, just that sort of paper trail of like, this is what you said. Do you agree to this rate?
Yeah, that's like a contract, I mean, in a way, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be, I think in many ways it would be binding on this level, but I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. Like, what do I know? I'm not the fancy one.
Well, you want to focus on development, right? As much as you can. I mean, unless you got the money to hire people, you don't really want to spend all your time doing all that stuff. So
yeah, and it's not like, it's not like you don't have resources. I'm sure if I posted on Facebook, like, do I know anyone who knows a lawyer who could look over a problem for me? And or whatever, like I'm sure we would have access to something like that if we need to.
It might not even need to be a lawyer. Like, if you have other people that have dealt with contracts, or even like have their own indie studio and who've written up their own, they could probably look over yours and like tell you if it sounds
legal.
Yeah. Totally.
Legal.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what you need, right? You need it to sound like it's I think that in terms of preparing documents for clients, I think that the more professional you present yourself, the more it feels like there could be ramifications for not following through. And I think that that's more important than anything else.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because what I found myself doing more than, say, a contract is a design document of what I'm going to do. And that is almost like the map of, hey, this is what we're doing, and I will have the milestones on there of what delivered. And for me, I don't know if this is worth mentioning under this question umbrella, but for me, I most of the times, and especially in the beginning of doing it, I wouldn't get any money up front or an hourly rate. It would be like I had to negotiate a deal where they would pay me per milestone, and that money was actually so low that I had to also negotiate a deal. And you guys should think about this. If they're trying to lowball you, negotiate a deal where you get some percentage of the profit, because that's what I did. And it wasn't in perpetuity, which I would do next time. They wouldn't allow that. I wouldn't have done it without perpetuity, but it was at least a good chunk of the profit for a certain amount of time that made it worth me taking the risk up front. And the way to explain that is, if you're making me take a risk, then you need to take a risk and give me some of that money on the back end, So
yeah, I agree.
If you're unwilling to take a risk on me up front, then you need to pay me later, and that's sort of the idea. Then I'm taking more of the risk. It may not sell, blah, blah, blah. But if you believe in what you're doing, then hey, you're going to get paid one way or the other. Just try to make it work. That's, for me, it was like, try to get that $50 an hour any way you can. If they only want to pay 20, then get the 30 on the back end, like that's sort of what my goal was always. And it was mainly because I was working with other people and I wanted to make sure that at their skill level, they were getting paid the money they should be getting paid. So
I think like writing up contracts, it may seem like really tough and it might seem like, something that you just have to do. But if you have a love for your craft, you should also have a love of like protecting, like making sure you do your due diligence with whatever you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you work with non-game companies like I've done, they don't understand the value of what we do. And so you need to explain that to them and stand your ground, and say, okay, well, if you don't want to pay it, then go, literally go try to find someone else for a less price because you won't. So.
Yeah, and like there's so many times where I'm like, look, I know that what I do is expensive and it might not be for you, and that's fine. Like, and I can point you towards resources that cost a lot less.
Yeah, and I've had them say, "Oh, we're just going to take an internal and have IT develop it," and then it never comes out. So, you know, that's I say, okay, go upon your way, and you know, that.
It's funny. It's funny because I think the part of freelance that I found the most scary is when I'm working with a new client and we may have some sort of written agreement or whatever, and then it's just like, all right, here's my first invoice, and then you're like, please send money, please send money.
Oh my
and then
goodness.
you get like a bing and you're like, yes.
I had a new client. I had a new client last month, and like I had sent that original email where I'd said, you know, like, hey, this is the, and I wasn't sure if they'd seen it or whatever. So anyways, I sent the invoice on like, because I know this person personally, so I was like, okay, well, hopefully. So I went to bed and I'm like, please pay me. And then I wake up the next day, and usually clients take like 10 days, you know, because you want to draw out your liability. So oftentimes companies will wait a long time to pay. But I woke up the next morning to a payment, and I was like, this is the best day ever.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky with the payments. Getting paid half up front, that's awesome. Like,
Especially when the
like
payments come in right before the bills.
yeah, right.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm
Question
like,
I'd like to
this
ask
should
you guys,
sit in
all of you
liability.
group, is that I've actually had trouble with that because I've worked with bigger companies that pay on their own schedule that can take months. And so now, do you ever do something where it's like in your contract or in your agreement, you say that they have to pay you within a certain amount of time after a milestone? Because I've never actually done that, so I don't know.
Yeah, I do that.
Okay,
I think you should. Yeah, I don't. Like,
Yeah.
I should have. This needs to be paid within 30 days, otherwise.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I put that on my invoices. I have no idea if that's legally binding, but
Yeah,
yeah, I'm kind of at their
because
mercy.
I have had clients that are like, you know, it's been 28 days, like, and that was a big invoice. Like, you need to pay me, and you have to send them a statement to be like, these are the outstanding invoices. These are the ones you paid. It's like, you know, and then it gets a little hairy. But generally, I find that once I send a statement, they're kind of like, oh shit, we didn't pay Jess.
I just
That's
send
weird in other industries.
I just send the where's my money thing from South Park. You know, where's my money, man? Where's my money? It's like beating him up.
In print and marketing, it's ridiculous. It'll take up to 6 months sometimes for a vendor to pay. So I guess
that's awful.
So.
This actually, so we kind of have touched on somebody's question here. So they were asking about the net 30, 15, 10, which is what we were just talking about of like, do we put in our invoices, like pay me at this date? Mine says 15 days. Jess, you said yours says 30 days. But the first part of the question, and I'm not sure how to pronounce this name, Song Kid. Yeah, YouTube name. How have you set rates, and what variables do you consider when setting your rates?
Oh my gosh. Wait, I have a resource for this. I gotta
What a question.
That's a good question.
It is the question, I believe, for all freelancers.
I actually I make my rates competitive against my last rate.
Oh wow.
So if you want me to do work, like fine, it just has to pay more than the thing that I could be doing.
Oh, that's cool.
That's basically what I've done too, is with only a handful of exceptions, every job I've done, I charged small amount more than my last job.
Small. We're not talking like, well, this job was a $40 job, but now you're going to pay me $100.
Right, yeah, not that. But
no, like dollars, but.
Yeah.
So mine's kind of arbitrary, but because I was working with some people that were working at studios that were sort of moonlighting to help me out, I sort of based it off of, you know, kind of like an average of what we make broken down to hourly, that kind of thing. And yeah, like I said, I try to get that, but if I can, I try to get some kind of percentage on the back end that'll get it. So, because a lot of times working in the Midwest, business to business, I'm doing something for a marketing company. They don't understand the value. So you got to sort of show them the value. And then like the one major VR project I did, they're happy to pay me on the back end because it was successful for them. So, plus they were contracted.
I don't envy you.
For me,
yeah.
when I first went freelance, I had somebody tell me, figure out your highest rate, and that is based on how much you need to live or how much you were making at your last job. So I did the math of what my hourly rate was, including all my benefits at my last job, and then plus that by like 20%. So taxes and other things that you need as a freelancer, especially the lean times. The lean times of not making money, and so that's my top end rate. And so I also do consulting, which is a little different than freelance because sometimes the consulting is 1 hour a week, and that's like executive coaching and stuff like that. And that's like my top tier rate. And then based on the amount of hours that someone's going to book me for a month, that rate drops. So I have like the bottom threshold and the top threshold, and the top threshold is if you are only asking for 4 to 5 hours a month of my time, then you're paying the top threshold. If you're booking me for 40 hours a month, then you're paying my lowest threshold.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Oh, I was going to say a variable that I consider is there's been a couple of projects that I worked on where I really, really believed in the project, and I also knew that the people doing it didn't have a lot of financial backing. So for those particular projects, because it was a thing I really wanted to see happen, I was comfortable working at a much lower rate than I normally would have. And in one case, I still feel that I was paid in like in other ways because just being attached to that project was very high profile, and it's opened a lot of doors for me. But generally speaking, I don't do that.
Yeah. I have maybe a Kickstarter project or something like that I might be talking to, and it's like, or a student. And sometimes it's like, well, we don't have a lot of money, and if I am going to cut them a deal, and like I try not to, just because I try not to devalue my work, because I think it's important that I set a standard for what my work is worth, and but in the rare case that I cut someone a deal, if they're a really good friend or whatever, I kind of mark it down on my my accounts as I still made the same amount of money, but 300 of that money might have been charity, right? So I just consider it like pro bono work. But that's really tough, right? When you're working on a project. I mean, the equity comment from earlier was a good suggestion. How do you deal with student projects or Kickstarters? And maybe it is a lot to do with like being attached to it, or this person might be a huge they might have so many connections, like what are they called? Malcolm Gladwell's like connector, right? You want to know them. I don't know.
Grant touched on it a bit, where he said sort of work it out to get kind of what you want to get and justify it however you want. I think that's kind of what you can do because you're a freelancer, right? So that's, everybody kind of touched on that. It seems like we all sort of cook the books a little to get what we need, and that's not cook the books, but contort things a little too.
We're not cooking the books. IRS agent. No one cooks books here.
I have a question for Jessica, actually, because you're an illustrator. So I'm curious as to how you set rates, because I find that creative work is the hardest work for me to set a rate for.
I actually kind of handle it a lot like how we handle our game design projects. So we do like a budget plan at the beginning, or I guess at the end of the year for the next year. And we kind of like plan out how much would we like to make based on our bills, where we plan to go for that year, and like grocery costs and all of that. And then do we want leisure time, like time for movies and going out to dinners every so often. And we kind of guesstimate, and then we add like another, $1,000 on top of that, just to give some leeway room. And I kind of set my rates for the year based on that. And also like how I can allocate my time for different projects. Like if it's going to be really cut and dry and I only have 10 clients a month and that's enough to hit the minimum, then, and I don't have time to take any, side projects, then that's it. Like I can't take any side projects. Yeah.
I have another question for you. If you estimate an illustration will take you 2 hours, but it takes you 8 hours, do you bill for that? Or do you consider it like, I took too long, so I should want to bill for the 2 hours?
It depends on the client. Some of the clients for original commissions, where they want something wholly original, there's a lot more leeway with that, because the people that tend to want original commissions, they really want something the artist has put a lot of their love into. So in the contracts, they're like, if it takes more than X amount, or if it needs extra for materials and whatever, we just put that in the contract. And they kind of just trust that it's not going to be some, out there number at the end of it.
Well, because in programming and designing, especially when you're doing some stuff that you haven't done before, I end up taking way longer than probably you could, justify. You know what I mean? So but
That happens to me all the time.
That might be the difference, Bo, between more like stringent kind of pipeline work and my fine art work. The fine art work, oh my God, there's so much money that can be made in fine art. just by the amount.
Tell me more.
Just like a lot of people see like pieces that go up into like their offices or into their hotels or restaurants. That's like a completely different payment model. Like you hear about these grants. Actually, people should look into these. But like you hear about these grants that cities have. They put like $25,000 at a time or $100,000, and artists just kind of apply. And I know Oakland's doing one right now. And you apply, you get to set how much money of the grant you want, and then you paint one single mural for Oakland. And I have seen other artists have no problem, getting $10,000, $15,000 for one mural. And they only end up spending like $1,000 worth of materials. So I don't know. There's like a lot of like, it's a lot different for fine art. At least from what I found.
Interesting.
Fine art.
Yeah, fine art, and especially depending on who you're speaking to, I find that project costs can either I get met with complete shock and awe, or I get met with like, okay, or I get met with, that's way too cheap. You shouldn't be charging that. Like same exact project. It just depends on what type of, the end user, who are they? Like what, how much money are they starting with? But I find it difficult personally to set prices for creative projects because of exactly that. If I do like little illustrations or something, I find that a lot of times they want to pay me like $30, and I'm like, bro, this is like a 5-hour painting. Like it's never going to be a $30 painting. And then if I come and if I don't establish upfront exactly how much it's going to cost, it totally comes and bites me later. So I don't do that anymore, but it's hard.
So when we did the audio panel, obviously a lot of them do freelance work, and we were talking about how you set your price points. Specifically, what's it like to negotiate? And everybody there was saying they've never had, and from my experience it's the same, they've never had somebody say, buy. They always have somebody say, oh, you're charging too much. How about this price? And then you kind of can negotiate to it. And that kind of set in my mind, like I should always start with a high number. And it's really funny because I did some work for a friend's company, and I told them like my high number, and the guy was like, okay. And I was expecting him to be like, oh, let's negotiate. And I told my friend, I was like, and I was like, wow. He said that he agreed to that super quick, and my buddy was like, yeah, you didn't charge enough. Like they would have paid more. And I was like, oh. So that's fine. I don't care because I still got paid what I thought was what I deserved. But Akash says he writes a lot about this stuff. And if you go back and watch the audio stuff, he talks about his blog and stuff. And he talks a lot about this, and he talks about like you're charging too little. Like he had somebody once accept his work, pick him because he charged the most, because they view quality equals money. So
they've done things like that in stores where they sell something like a perfume for way more and people buy it. It's crazy.
So it's just something to think about. Maybe not great when you're first starting out, but something to think about.
So,
I think that like, go ahead.
Oh no, that's fine. You're speaking first.
I was just going to say that I think that a really firm understanding of economics principles is really important if you're going to be doing freelance work, because opportunity cost is huge. Like you could fill your entire day with work if you really wanted to, and if you really try hard at being a freelancer, you could do it. But there comes a time where when someone's asking you to work on a Saturday or turn around a project in like 4 days, that these concepts of opportunity costs really come into play, and that starting number needs to be very different depending on that. But
And that's the point of freelance, calling your own shots, right? Like,
yeah.
that's definitely cool.
Paige, you were going to say something?
Yeah, so dovetailing off what you were saying, I've also found, so all of my freelance game development work has been with either startups or indie developers. And in that space, what I found is that as my experience and credibility grew, there was kind of like a threshold I passed where people expected me to charge more. So it was sort of like when I was first starting out, I charged very low rates partly because the people I was working for often had recently started out themselves. And once I came to the point where that wasn't the case anymore, where I could say, yes, I've been doing this for 5 years, and I've worked on these big name projects, then there was sort of this shift in my clients' perceptions of what I was worth. And so I feel like that's an interesting thing you have to keep in mind is as you set your price points is like, never work for free, but also if you're a student, maybe don't expect to get that much until you've been working for a little while.
There's actually like, again, I mean, this will be different for everybody, but there's also like holding on to long-term clients. So the first times I did conventions, I probably have like 10, 15 clients right now that are permanent clients that I met at conventions like years ago. And at first they paid me, like not livable commission prices, but they were investing in me knowing that as I grew and my art improved, they expected that the prices would go up. And, they ended up staying, they commissioned me every year. And that's kind of like, that's the kind of clients that I like to have. There are some clients, long-term clients you get that are like, hey, we've been buddies for like 3 years. Can I get a discount of like 100%? Yeah,
that bugs me. I mean, like honestly, and I know that it comes from like when people ask that, they don't fully, I think, understand what they're asking. But I have a personal policy with that. If I hire one of my friends to do work for me, that I don't pay them any less than what they would have charged anybody else. And it's just like, I don't know, it gets to me when that happens. Like, hey, I know you. Can I get your work for free? And you're like, this is how I live.
Well, I've taken that further, what you just said, just like where I've wanted to pay them so well, the way they should be paid so much that I've actually taken less myself. Like, and that's something I've had to deal with also with negotiations is I'm a people pleaser. And that works really well when you're at a company that's taking care of you. But when you're taking care of yourself, I had to get into negotiation. I had to learn how to show my worth and like put that high number up there and be like, yep, this is the number. I know you think I'm crazy. Because I didn't have the experience of working with a lot of game companies that understood. They're more businesses like marketing companies, advertising companies that wanted to make a game for a convention. So like they didn't understand it all. And my path was a lot like Jessica's though, where I got to know them, they got to know me, and I only had a few clients and they're still my clients. So, it's like, so they come to me for everything now, and even if it's like, you can't do it, but you can recommend someone and get like a finder's fee, so
I think actually you just touched on something about freelancers. Like you shouldn't also, I don't know, for me, connections are just as important they're kind of like, it's on par with getting paid, because the connection that I make with the person that I'm being paid from, if they can connect me to 3 more people that will commission me, then that's way more value than just the price that I'm getting from like a one-time person that I'll never see again. So I don't know.
Yeah.
As a freelancer, when you're not working on like a 9-to-5 job, at an office, but connections and networking are something that you might want to think about when looking for clients.
Yeah.
Holy,
So-
You have to be so good at networking and selling yourself, like not in a,
So-
like a chummy way, but
So we're going to talk about that in just a second. One thing I wanted to say that just comes from me being the type of person I am and what I do, and I think we're all kind of saying, but hasn't explicitly been said, is when you go freelance, you need to, just like starting a business, you need to have a mission statement. You need to have goals of what you're trying to accomplish with this. For me, I wrote out like a whole mission statement of what I wanted to do as a freelancer. Like, you know, I want to have a better work-life balance than I had working within a studio environment. So that means, you know, I'm not trying to work 60 hours a week. I'm booking myself for 40 hours a week, you know, and Jessica kind of talked about this a little bit, but I think that's really important. Depending on where you are in your career, you know, there may be a point where you need to work super hard. And the thing that I did when I started out was I figured out my minimum yearly budget. And then I compared that to like the rates and stuff. And I'm like, okay, now let's figure out how many clients I need to get and how much work I need to do. Once I pass that yearly budget, I just dropped down to 40 hours a month, because there's no reason, you know, to kill yourself if that is your goal. But if your goal is to be a workaholic and work 80 hours a week and make as much money as you can, then that's your goal. It's just important to identify that at the start of, you know, you're starting a company. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah, and I didn't do that, so I can speak from the other side of sort of coming into it more like, I just want to stay in the Midwest and I'll just play it by ear, and then being required to sort of get more organized as I went. So, you know. So do it from the beginning like Grant. Be like Grant.
So the all-important question, the one that multiple people have asked, is how do you get clients? But also, second part of that, how, as a new person, do you get clients?
like
Let's teach them how to take our
new
jobs.
person.
Like you're new to freelance.
Not new to like the industry. I hate that term.
No, new to freelance.
So I can answer that with respect to the particular kind of freelancing that I do. So I've, like I said, I've only done indie games, and I'm really glad you mentioned the mission statement, because that's why. Like, that wasn't an accident. I was like, this is what I want to do. And in particular, I'm in a very particular niche where I want to work on games that I feel like are improving the representation of marginalized people, either behind the scene making the game, or, you know, as characters in a game, or ideally both. So for me, what you know, there's a lot of different things that have played into it, but I think the number one foundation to me getting clients is that I spent years going to events. And when I first started out, I did this kind of indiscriminately. You know, anything from like a local high school being, come talk to our kids about what it's like to be a game developer, you know, all the way up to like going to something like PAX or GDC. But at this point, I've sort of learned, where do my people go? And I go to those events. So, you know, the kinds of games I want to work on are the kinds where those developers are going to be at, Indiecade or GamerX or different games. So those are the events that I go to, and I go to them basically every single time they happen. And some of my friends were like, that's a huge amount of money to spend, you know, how can you afford it? But I guess I thought, well, I can't not afford it, because that's where I'm going to get jobs from.
I started the same way. I don't know if I would recommend it to anybody, but like, for me, the best way to see if what I had in my mind in terms of career would actually work is to go to these conventions, these art conventions, and sell. And when you're sitting behind a booth and you have your artwork that's up there being judged by everybody, and you need to one-on-one talk with clients in person, like, you learn very quickly what people are looking for, how they connect with you, and you have to just have your mission statement and know how to talk to people very quickly. Otherwise, you know, it's not worth it to go into that industry if you can't really, like, yeah.
The industry?
Yeah, the industry.
The industry.
For me, it was very similar to Paige, where I was I would just go to network. I would network my little heart out. I remember really wanting that 500 plus badge on LinkedIn, and wanting it not just like adding people, because anyone can do that. I wanted to add 500 people that I knew in the industry that I had met, and I might even have had all of their business cards at one point. And like these connections were helpful for me. I found that personally, the best connections that I ever had, because I'm really bad about being like, hey, posting to my whole Facebook group, like friends or people I don't know very well, that you can hire me. Instead, what I do is I might be at dinner with people and they say, what do you do? And I'm like, I have my own company and my company offers these services. Here's my card. If you know anyone that needs these things, tell them to email me. And out of that, I've gotten a really, really good contacts. But I think that the point that everyone seems to be talking about, which is what's valuable to you, I think that you need to be discretionary about what jobs you pick up. I mean, obviously in the beginning, when you're networking, you're just trying to get the jobs. Maybe you're not as discretionary, but as you network and as you interface with new people, being really selective with who you want to work with, because at the end of the day, yeah, what you're getting paid isn't as good as what you're getting out of it, which is like, I want to live in other countries. So yeah, I would get paid less if it meant I could do that. So just knowing exactly the kind of network you want to be part of and the kind of work that you want to do is a really good starting template.
Yeah, that was, being like one-on-one with people to hear their projects, to know what they're up to, and if they became clients of mine, then, that was what I wanted with my career, is the clients that I have, I want to know them and their projects and what they're passionate about, because, I want to support them, and in return, like if they want to support me, great.
Totally.
Yeah, for me, it's like putting a face to,
important.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like my approach is slightly different because it's just I wanted to be in the Midwest for personal reasons, for family stuff, and it's really is a game development desert, or like a tundra, I guess. And what I found was that a lot of the approaches everyone else was taking were things that I was taking when I was working at a big company in the game industry. Going to conventions, meeting people, networking, also in school. And then after about like 8 years of that is when I went freelance. So I sort of had like some of that juice built up, and then if I didn't have that, it would have been nothing. It's sort of like that luck is preparation, meets opportunity or whatever. That's really my approach. Was I'm in a desert of it. I just need to be open to any possibility. And the way it worked was I taught myself web development because that was the main amount of freelance jobs there were. I went on like Codecademy, learned some web development. Not hard if you already know programming. And then when I was interviewing for a job at a company, they saw on my resume that I had worked on video games, and they were wanting to make a VR game. So for me, it's been a lot of happenstance, but it is being prepared and being, and being willing. And, I listen to your stories, and I'm a little jealous that, it's like, I just didn't have the resources or the time to go to PAX and things like that during this time in my life. So luckily I had done some of that front loaded though, because I think you're not getting anywhere around the industry without networking. And you really need to develop those relationships and that trust with people. When I needed somebody to do some interface programming for the VR, he had never done VR, but I just knew the guy was amazing and he would get anything done. And having a friend like that, multiple friends like that, I mean, that's valuable as well. So, that was my
resources. That's an important word.
When I started this, I talked to Jess actually, and she jokingly said something like, I will do whatever they need me to do if they're going to pay me. And she's like, I'll do web dev, I'll do this. And one of my long-term clients now, their first thing is they wanted me to help them build a presentation, like literally a slide deck. And I was like, they're like, this is what we need. And they're like, can you do that? And I was like, yeah, I can do that.
Totally.
I'm the best at that. I'm literally the best person you can hire for that.
You
and then
come
I was
to
like,
the right person.
Afterwards, and I did it, and they were really happy with how it went. And then they called me and they're like, hey, we have some questions about some other things. And I did that, and I did the presentation. I charged them, but every other phone call was free because it was like 10 minutes, And then next thing I know, they're like, hey, we want you like 5 hours a week, and we're going to pay you this much, and like all that, So it's about the networking, but it's also about being willing to do things that maybe are a little bit outside of what you traditionally do. Because when I first started, I was like, I only want to do like leadership training and coaching. And then I was like, I'd be kind of interested to do kind of just freelance production. And that's kind of paying the bills full time now. And I can kind of leisurely do the other things that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, I think that like
you have to do that, so it's great.
and like what I was saying earlier about like being discretionary, I Grant is quoting me very accurately. I mean like you should be discretionary about the types of jobs that you're taking on. Like I want to be able to be remote, but I think that it's really important to be the kind of person that's like, hey, look, I think this is kind of in the skill set that I have, so I'll try it. And there's so many jobs that come to me that are like I'm working on this project right now that is going to be the death of me. But in the beginning, they were like, can you do it? And I was like, you bet I can. I can absolutely.
Well, if you're the type of person that always finishes, even if it's the death of you, that's also a good thing to have, and that's
there was
a lot of the good developers I know do that, they always come through no matter what. So, it's just like.
In terms of being like discretionary with projects, I think there's another aspect of it too. I had a friend who does voice acting, and she got hired onto this job where they just needed her to read like these educational lines, and it was good pay. And when she was doing the educational lines, she realized that it was talking about a subject that she did not agree with. I think it was like animal testing or something. And she didn't know that going into it. So it was a little awkward to have to separate herself from that because that wasn't something that she ultimately wanted on her portfolio. I don't know. Just
philosophy conversation.
I echo that. I definitely do stuff that I believe in. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, if it's something that doesn't interest me, unless I really needed the money, but I haven't really ran across that. Like I've done some web development that I could send you guys links and you'd be like, yeah, like this is some boring BS. But if it's a game or something, and or like she does voice acting for a living, right? Your friends. So if it's something that's directly mainline what I do, then it better reflect, sort of the things I want to do. You know what I mean? But
I guess I'm just saying, like, when you get a project, you might want to ask a couple questions to get to know the project first.
Yeah. And like, I mean, we used to have these debates in one of my classes in university where it was like, would you edit a porn if it paid really well? And you just like, there is no correct answer for that. You're not a bad person if you were like, hell yeah. I would edit a porn.
I said I would do it for free. Is that bad?
Different conversation. But I think that like it's more about know thyself. Like freelancing really, really you got to know who you are, what you want, and where you're trying to go. Like if you don't mind editing porns and you make boku bucks, then edit porn. Like whatever.
That's a really good point. You're a monolith, It's not like you work for a company and you can sort of hide under their brand, right? You are your brand, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
all right, so we have a few more questions I want to try and burn through here with our last 5 minutes. Doug asks, what's the longest gap that you have had between contracts, and have you ever had companies put you on hold between contracts?
That's like a European thing they do a lot, garden leave. But I worked in Europe for a few months, but nothing like that. So.
I mean, I find that my contracts or my projects don't resolve. Like we talked about, I charge half up front for a project. And that probably gives you an idea that my projects aren't like 5 figures, but what I find is that they don't resolve for a long time. So it's supposed to be a 1-month project, and then it'll end up taking 5 months before I see that other half. So if I was counting on it, which is a bad idea, you should never do that. It takes a long time to see it through.
So the longest gap for me in the beginning, I started freelance January 2015, and I had sort of like a web development gig that was sort of like steady but not paying anything. And then I had that interview about the web development, and then they wanted to work with me. That took almost till the end of the year for us to start working. So, so when I started out, I mean, it was a long time before I kind of got that first project chugging. I had a lot of learning to do, and also on their end, they hadn't worked with game developers. So,
what I would say is I've never had a gap where I just had nothing, but I've spent a lot of time where I wasn't making enough with the freelancing I was doing to cover all my bills, and then I would have to do something else on the side to supplement that.
All right. Here's a good question from Joshua. Would you guys rather have a few long-term clients or many short-term clients?
Long term.
Yeah.
Good clients.
Yeah,
I'd
good
just say
clients.
good,
There you
good
go.
clients. That's the one.
Good long-term clients who pay
Yeah, I
Who
would
pay
take
top
a few
tier.
long term.
and never want me to meet them in the office, except maybe on milestone day or something.
I've recently been like, something's been brought to my attention very recently, this concept of task switching. And I'm trying to take it into consideration, which is like, if I take on a bunch of these tiny little projects, every time I move off of one project, which might be this like 120% brain power programming job, and move on to like sketching a logo, I have to like, I don't know, I have to like unwind and change brains. I don't know.
Yeah, well, as game developers and as creators, though, it's good to hone those skills, right? Because we're always having to do that, even on one project. I feel like I'm switching context on the same project a lot too, you know. But I guess that depends on what you're doing. I was doing design and programming as well, so, and we just bought all the art. But now that I know all you lot, but I didn't
need
have
any.
art for a lot of stuff we did. It was just like Unity, you know, bought from Turbo Squid and Unity. I wouldn't recommend that. The Bespoke art is way better. So
someone asked a question that we kind of answered earlier, but I just wanted you guys to answer it super quickly. What do you use to keep track of invoices / business things? So just name the things and they can go back and watch the whole conversation at the beginning.
I use Wave, and I mean, I use a whole bunch of things. Wave, Square, a couple others.
I use Toggle, and I have a file full of saved invoices as a folder full of saved invoices as PDFs and a template. But I'm going to check out Wave now.
yeah,
I'm gonna check out Toggle and Wave.
I'm
I use
excited.
hours for teams.
Wait. I do use the app Mint. Is that what it's called? Mint.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. It just connects to your like bank account, and it keeps track of all your expenses and income and stuff. Like, and then you can look at your phone and be like, "Whoa, I spent like $500 shopping for art supplies. That's not what I was supposed to do this month."
I use
Yeah,
Word and New Cash, which is a double entry accounting system.
Ooh, double
I'm so
entry.
boring.
Fancy.
Excuse me, I have to go to my office.
I use Google Drive files. I'm a master of fake Excel. Cheap person Excel is what I call it. All right, so one more question, and then we're going to ask a final question. Does the panel have any opinion on Unity Connect, or if they have resources like that to get gigs? My guess is y'all are going to say any resources you use that get you a job are a good resource, is what I'm going to guess everybody's going to say.
Yeah,
I don't know what
But if
Unity
any-
Connect is.
IndieDB is kind of cool. A lot of the stuff's for like scale or for like points on the project. But if you're, you know, say like Paige, where she's interested in certain types of projects, then you can go on IndieDB and look. Or I guess Unity Connect isn't something I've used, but it seems promising.
Yeah, I think the same thing about Unity Connect.
If it works, use it.
Yeah.
I think
And I've totally gotten clients to like change. If I'm like, I don't really like using Skype, let's use Discord. Oh, you don't use Discord? Sign up. Here you go.
I will say though that the flip side is also true. Like, not speaking from personal experience, but I know I have had friends that used like I forget what it's called, but various web services to find clients, and it felt like for the particular ones they were using, the quality of jobs being pitched was so low that it was just a huge time sink to sort of comb through and find things that were worth following up on.
Fiverr.
That's it. That's exactly what it was. Yeah, I couldn't think of the name. That's exactly what it was.
I hate
It was
Fiverr.
Fiverr.
I'm sorry. There's nothing wrong with Fiverr. I hate Fiverr.
I used it to write my book, so thanks, Fiverr. All right.
I found
Last
jobs
question.
on
We'll go
Indeed.
into.
Just throwing that out.
what?
I found freelance jobs on Indeed before.
Oh,
Indeed.
interesting.
Fancy.
I've
Yeah.
seen those on there before. Yeah, little freelance jobs and stuff. A lot of times they want you to work in the office, though. But.
Yeah, that's true. So, all right. Thank you all for being here. We're going to go through the same order that we introduced ourselves, and answer 2 questions. What is your biggest challenge being a freelancer, and any final advice? So we'll start with Jess, and then do Jessica, Zippmann, Paige, and then I'll close this out. So
Do I answer both right now?
Yes.
Okay. My biggest challenge as a freelancer is that I take on too many projects. So I'm the kind of person that's like, oh, I have a weekend. I can totally take on another 16 hours of work this week. And I find that I lose out on exactly what I wanted when I started being a remote contract freelance, whatever worker, was that now I spend all my time stressing about work that I picked up and I gave myself. My number one piece of advice is opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the most important concept that you could ever understand as a freelancer, that value is derived completely within you, and that if you find value in exchanging equity, or if you find value in working with clients who are concerned with things like, fighting animal testing or whatever, then that has real value for you. Just because it doesn't resolve as dollars doesn't mean that it's not valuable. So understand exactly what your trade-offs are and what you're willing to, how that translates for you.
Jessica.
So I guess last bit of advice, huh? I think the thing that I guess want to impart is more a mental thing. Like, I know plenty of freelancers and particularly artists that get burnt out or have periods where they need to take a break, or go on a hiatus, and then they get really stressed out because they feel like they must be doing something every single minute of the day. They need to be working and making money and whatever else. And I guess for state of mind and mental health, just breathe. Take a break, because if you're a creative or you're a programmer or whatever it is, like, that's always going to be a part of you, and when you come back to do your work, it will be there waiting for you. So
I like that. Oh, you had one more question to answer. What was your toughest challenge? Sorry, Grant, I took over your moderator. Jessica, you're supposed to answer your toughest question. Sorry, I didn't say that.
Doing great.
I thought it was to everybody. What was the question?
Question. You're double duty on this one.
Yeah, your biggest challenge.
My biggest challenge?
Yeah. In being a freelancer.
For the type of work that I do, you have to expose a lot of yourself and your thoughts to the world, particularly if you do original stuff. And that was my biggest challenge, was being okay with putting my work out there and realizing that you really don't have to appease everyone, not even a lot of people. If you have a niche group of people that really love what you do and follow what you do, that's, at least for me, that's plenty for me. Yeah, that took a long time to come to realize.
That's really good advice. Like, I find I need to listen to that more too. Like, 'cause my biggest challenge is being picky. Really, it's not about like web projects and other types of stuff. I'll do anything in those realms, but when it comes to game stuff, I'm really picky about the game, how it's presented, what the mechanics are, and because I am a game designer, and there's certain things I don't like about certain game mechanics that have popped up in, say, the past 10 years, 15 years. And so that was hard for me. And then also trying to work on a shoestring budget within that. So like, I'm picky and I don't have any money to spend. And so it's sort of like, it was hard to get into some of those first ones. But then the double-edged sword of that as a challenge was once I did get into it, then I found myself actually spending, like on the VR project, I spent a lot of the money I made on it on further VR stuff, so I could I kind of went down the rabbit hole. So, you know, if you're trying to run your own business, make sure you run it like a business.
Yeah.
And then my piece of advice is, it relates to the luck thing. You know, luck is preparation. You know, it's being prepared for the things that come along. And so, you know, Rob Dyrdek, you probably know who he is. He always says, make your own luck. And I really love that sentiment. You know, don't sit around and wait for life to give you. This goes for if you want to be a game developer, freelance or not. You know, just know what your goal is and find a path to your goal. Beg, borrow, and deal a path to your goal. Figure it out any way you can, because if that's your passion, you know, then that's what you need to go for. And what you'll find probably is if you're passionate about it, then, you know, it's going to be easier for you than if you weren't. So yeah, make your own luck.
So I guess for my biggest challenge, I'm gonna say work-life balance, because for a number of years it was I would have just said crunch. Like I kind of am a workaholic and I'm prone to crunching, and like we're in an industry where that's business as usual. And it took me a while to learn this was bad, that it wasn't helping me, but it also was not helping my clients. It took me even longer to go from I know this is bad to I'm not doing it. And now I kind of feel like I've maybe even overcorrected, where like I don't crunch anymore. I have a much nicer life, but I almost feel like I probably should be working more than I am now. So that's something that I continue to struggle with. My best piece of advice, this goes back to networking, and there's sort of like two layers of networking. And I feel like what people mostly talk about is, you know, exchange business cards, make sure people know what you do, have your face seen at places, and all of that's important. But I think what for a freelancer is actually more important is make friends. Like when you go to GDC, don't just say, oh, hey, what's your game? That's neat. But like if somebody seems interesting to you, like follow up with that, because like these people are awesome, right? They probably want to be your friend. You're awesome too. Like that's half of why I'm here, is to get to know other game developers. But even from a strictly mercenary perspective, a lot of the jobs that I've gotten because a friend recommended me. So even if this person can't hire you, they know who you are, they know what you're good at, they know what you're excited about. So yeah, that's my advice. Make friends.
Awesome. Yeah. For myself, almost all of my freelance gigs have come through friends recommending me. So definitely great advice. I want to thank our panelists once again for taking time out to give this amazing advice that is really valuable, and I'm excited to go back and rewatch and write everything down that I've learned. So thank you all, and thank you everybody who's been here to ask questions, and we'll be here again next month. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Great to meet everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.